Okay, just take a moment. Think about where you are. What if everything around you, the sounds, the feeling of the air, even, I don't know, your own thoughts?
Yeah.
What if it's all just part of some incredibly detailed construct? Is what you're feeling right now actually real? Or could it be something else? Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving headfirst into, well, one of the most mind-bending, maybe even unsettling ideas around the simulation hypothesis. Basically, it's the notion that what we think of as reality might just be a super advanced computer simulation. And us, maybe we're just, programs running inside it.
Right. It sounds like pure science fiction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the idea has surprisingly deep philosophical roots, and it got a more formal treatment in modern philosophy thanks to Nick Bostrom back in 2003. So yeah, we're definitely in for a bit of a mind-bending ride today.
We absolutely are. So our mission for this deep dive, let's unpack where this, frankly, audacious idea even came from, trace its ancient roots. Then we'll dig into Bostrom's really influential argument, the one that kind of brought it into the 21st century. We'll weigh the big criticisms, and there are quite a few.
Oh, yeah.
Explore if anyone's actually trying to test this, scientifically.
Right. Can we even check?
And finally, look at how this whole concept has just exploded in popular culture. So yeah, get ready. We're about to question, well, pretty much everything. Okay, so to really get this modern idea, we need to go back. Way back. Because the simulation hypothesis, it might feel really current, techie, but questioning reality itself, that's not new at all. Humans have been wrestling with this doubt for millennia.
Absolutely. It echoes across history in really different cultures, too.
Yeah.
You look at ancient China, there's the philosopher Zhuangzi.
Ah, the butterfly dream.
Exactly. He dreamt he was a butterfly, then woke up and genuinely wasn't sure. Was he a man who dreamt he was a butterfly, or is he now a butterfly dreaming he's a man?
It perfectly captures that uncertainty, doesn't it?
It really does. And then you have Indian philosophy, the concept of Maya.
The world as illusion.
Pretty much, yeah. A veil over what's truly real. Even ancient Greek thinkers like Anaxarchus and Monimus, they talked about reality being like impressions experienced in sleep or madness.
Wow, okay.
And if you look at Aztec philosophy, some texts theorize the world as a kind of painting or book created by the Peel, like a divine construct. Even Gnosticism had this idea of reality being made by a lesser god, maybe even a malevolent one, a flawed simulation, you could almost say.
And in Western philosophy, you just can't skip Plato's allegory of the cave, right?
Oh, no, definitely not. It's fundamental. The prisoner's chained up, only seeing shadows, mistaking those flickering shapes for the whole truth. It's such a powerful metaphor for, our potentially limited perception.
So how did that line of thinking evolve?
Well, René Descartes really formalized it philosophically. He came up with the evil demon thought experiment.
Right. What if some super powerful, cunning being is just feeding us lies, deceiving all our senses?
Exactly. And that thought experiment, it directly leads to things like the brain in a vat scenario.
Yeah. Ah, yes. The disembodied brain, hooked up thinking it's living a normal life.
And the core question is always the same. How could you possibly know if you were in that situation? How could you tell the difference?
Okay, so we have these deep philosophical roots, these ancient doubts. How does it leap into, computers and physics?
That's where it gets really interesting in the modern era. Back in 1969, Konrad Zuse, a German computer pioneer, he actually wrote a book called Calculating Space.
Okay.
And in it, he proposed this idea of a fundamentally computational universe, basically digital physics. The universe itself is a giant computation.
Whoa.
And then later, the roboticist Hans Moravec, he speculated that maybe our reality is a simulation run by future intelligences.
So the seeds were planted for what came next.
Precisely. It set the stage perfectly for Nick Bostrom.
Right. So Nick Bostrom, 2003, he publishes his simulation argument. Now, it's really important to get this right. Despite the name, he's not flat out saying we are in a simulation.
No, that's a common misconception.
It's more subtle. He presents this compelling trilemma, like a situation where one of three possibilities is almost certainly true. It's more of a logical puzzle about existence.
That's a great way to put it. So Bostrom's three propositions are, basically, 1, the chance of civilizations like ours reaching a post-human stage where they could run super realistic ancestor simulations is practically 0. Maybe we would blow ourselves up. Maybe there are limits.
Okay, possibility 1, we don't make it that far.
Possibility 2, civilizations do reach that stage, but the number actually interested in running these simulations is practically 0. Maybe it's unethical, maybe it's boring to them, who knows?
Right, they could, but they just don't.
And possibility 3, The fraction of all conscious beings with experiences like ours who are actually living in a simulation is very close to one.
Meaning we are almost definitely simulated.
Exactly. If option 3 is true, then simulated beings vastly outnumber real beings.
And that's where the anthropic reasoning comes in, the kind of aha moment.
Precisely. If proposition 3 is true, and almost everyone like us is in a simulation, then statistically speaking, the odds are overwhelmingly high that we are among them.
So it's a numbers game. If there are billions of simulated worlds and only one base reality.
You're much more likely to find yourself in one of the simulations.
Okay. But this whole argument hinges on some pretty big assumptions, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Crucial ones. First, you have to assume that consciousness isn't exclusively biological, that it can emerge from computational processes.
That a sufficiently complex program could actually be conscious.
Right. Second, that these simulations would be incredibly high fidelity, so good they'd be genuinely indistinguishable from reality.
No glitches, no obvious sign.
Mm-hmm. And third, that running simulations within simulations would be feasible, computationally speaking, that you wouldn't need, infinite resources in the real world.
Which leads to the big question, how would we ever find out? Did Bostrom offer any ideas?
Well, he did joke about maybe a window popping up saying, you are living in a simulation, click here.
Huh. Yeah, right.
But he also seriously considered that any imperfections, any glitches, might just be deliberately purged or patched by the simulators to maintain the illusion.
So finding proof might be impossible by design.
It could be. But Bostrom sees his argument differently from, say, old-school philosophical skepticism. He calls it a metaphysical hypothesis, but one with interesting empirical reasons behind it.
Meaning there might actually be ways to investigate it, unlike just saying maybe everything is a dream.
Kind of. He notes that most people who engage with the argument accept the logic of the trilemma. They just disagree on which of the three propositions is the most likely one. Some bet on extinction, some bet on disinterest.
And some bet we're in the matrix right now.
Essentially, yes. As he puts it, unless we are now living in a simulation, our descendants will almost certainly never run an ancestor simulation. It connects our fate to the likelihood of the hypothesis.
Okay, so Bostrom lays out this compelling, if unsettling, argument, but it definitely hasn't gone unchallenged, right? What's the pushback?
Oh, there's been significant pushback. Lots of criticisms. We can maybe group them a bit.
Yeah, let's try.
Okay, first, there are challenges around consciousness. This is a big one.
Right, can a simulation actually feel like anything?
Exactly. The consciousness problem. Some philosophers argue that simulated beings, sims, might not have genuine conscious experiences like us unsimulated folk presumably do. They might just be incredibly complex puppets,
Like philosophical zombies.
Sort of, yeah. And to address this, philosopher Barry Dayton proposed a variation, neural ancestor simulations.
Neural? How does that work?
Instead of simulating consciousness in a computer, what if future beings just grew actual biological brains in vats? Or maybe induce ultra-realistic shared hallucinations directly into real minds.
Whoa. Okay, so that sidesteps the whole can computers be conscious debate.
Right. It uses consciousness we already accept exists, but keeps the core simulation question. Are we experiencing one of those induced reality?
Clever. Okay, what other kinds of objections are there?
Then you have the feasibility challenges, often from physicists. People like Sabine Hassenfelder argue it's basically physically impossible to simulate our entire universe down to the quantum level without creating inconsistencies we could detect.
So the simulation would have tells, glitches.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
She's even called the whole idea of pseudoscience in religion. And cosmologist George F.R. Ellis is pretty blunt, too. Calls it totally impracticable, something for a late-night pub discussion.
Ouch.
Their point is often about the sheer scale, the computational power needed. It seems astronomical, maybe even fundamentally impossible, according to our current understanding of physics.
And isn't there skepticism about the whole reasoning method itself?
Yes, the rejection of anthropic reasoning. Some scholars just dismiss it as merely philosophical, or worse, unfalsifiable. If you can't test it, is it really science?
Right. The Karl Popper criterion. What about time? You mentioned something earlier about future simulators maybe not existing yet.
Yeah, that falls under philosophical roadblocks and logical contradictions. It's the presentism objection. If the simulators are future humans, but we exist now, how can they be running our present simulation if their now hasn't happened yet? It messes with the statistical argument.
Okay, that's a bit of a head-scratcher.
It is. And Sean Carroll, the cosmologist, points out another potential contradiction. If we assume humans are typical beings in the universe, and we clearly can't run these simulations yet,
Uh-huh.
then why assume other hypothetical civilizations can do it so easily?
Yeah.
It makes us seem uniquely incapable, which contradicts the assumption of typicality used in the anthropic reasoning.
Right. Why would we be the exception?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Frank Wilczek, the Nobel laureate physicist, he raises empirical objections. He looks at the universe itself.
What does he see?
He points out that our universe seems to have all this hidden complexity, these weird quantum rules, strict local laws of physics that don't change over time or space.
Yeah.
And he asks, why would a simulator bother with all that? It seems unnecessary and extraneous, like writing tons of extra complex code for background details no player character will ever interact with. It feels wasteful, inefficient for a simulation.
That's a good point. Unnecessary beauty, almost.
Kind of. And he also asks the embarrassing question. If we're in a simulation, what's the computer running it made of? What are the physical laws of that reality?
The infinite regress problem. Turtles all the way down.
Pretty much. Simulations within simulations within simulations.
Yeah.
Where does it stop? Brian Eggleston also pointed out a logical loop. The future humans of our specific universe can't logically be the ones running the simulation of our specific universe if the argument relies on them being descendants within it.
Okay, my head hurts slightly now.
Yeah, it gets naughty. And finally, there are motivational objections. Physicist Marcelo Gleiser just questions the why.
Why bother?
Right. Why would super advanced post-humans spend potentially vast resources simulating an entire universe, especially one filled with, let's be honest, a lot of suffering and mundane stuff? He calls it a colossal waste of time.
Maybe they're historians or scientists.
Maybe. But Gleiser argues it seems inefficient and again raises that first cause problem. If they're so advanced, wouldn't they have better, more interesting things to do than rerun history?
This leads to a really fascinating, almost spooky ethical thought from Preston Green.
Ah, yes, the idea that maybe we shouldn't dig too deep.
Right, that finding out we are in a simulation might actually end the simulation. Like, if we become self-aware in the wrong way, the simulators just pull the plug.
It's a chilling thought, which then connects to Robin Hanson, the economist, and his rather strange advice.
What's that?
He suggested that if you suspect you're simulated, maybe you should strive to be entertaining and praiseworthy.
To keep the simulators interested, so they don't shut you down or delete your file.
Basically, yeah. Or, on the flip side, he notes that realizing you might be in a simulation could really mute your motivation for long-term planning. Why save for retirement if it's all just code that could be wiped tomorrow?
Wow. Yeah, that would definitely change your perspective on, well, everything. Daily life, goals.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Moving away from the purely philosophical or the criticisms, how does this simulation idea connect with, say, actual science, like computation theories?
Yeah, it ties in very closely with computationalism. That's the theory that, at its core, cognition thinking, consciousness is a form of computation.
So the brain is like biological hardware running consciousness software.
In a nutshell, yes.
Yeah.
And if that's true, and if artificial consciousness is possible, meaning consciousness doesn't need squishy brain stuff, it just needs the right computational structure, then creating simulated minds, simulated conscious subjects, becomes theoretically possible. It implies consciousness could be platform independent. Run it on silicon, run it on neurons, maybe run it on something else entirely.
Like Hans Moravec explored with mathematical realism, the idea that computation itself could instantiate consciousness.
Exactly. If the patterns and relationships are complex enough, maybe the substrate doesn't matter.
Okay, so what about physics? How do physicists grapple with a potentially computational universe?
Well, physicist John Archibald Wheeler had this famous phrase, "it from bit," suggesting information is fundamental. That led to sort of two main views in physics related to this.
Okay.
One is that the universe literally is a quantum computer, that the laws of physics are the algorithm it's running.
The universe as the simulation and the computer running it.
Kinda, yeah. The other view is that our simulated universe is distinct from the underlying reality. The computer running it exists in a different substrate or dimension.
But not all physicists buy the universe as a quantum computer idea.
No, definitely not. Dave Bacon, a quantum computing expert, has been quite critical. He points out there's not much solid evidence for the universe being fundamentally digital or discrete at the lowest level, the Planck scale. And more importantly, he argues that the advocates of this view haven't really produced unique testable predictions that have been confirmed by experiment. It remains largely speculative.
Which brings us to testing. Have scientists actually proposed concrete experiments to try and detect if we're in a simulation? That feels like the crucial next step.
They have, which is really fascinating. Back in 2012, there was a notable paper by Silas Bean, Zora Davuti, and Martin Savage.
Okay, what did they propose?
They argued that if the simulation has finite computational resources, which seems likely, you can't have infinite computing power, then space-time itself might not be perfectly smooth and continuous. It might have to be broken down into discrete points, like a grid.
Like pixels on a screen, but for reality.
Exactly. And they suggested this underlying grid, this lattice structure, could potentially lead to observable effects.
Such as?
One key prediction was a potential anisotropy in the distribution of ultra-high-energy cosmic rays.
Okay, break that down.
Basically, cosmic rays are super-energetic particles hitting Earth from space. Normally, you'd expect them to come pretty much uniformly from all directions.
Right, space is big.
But if space has an underlying grid structure, maybe these highest energy particles would interact with that grid in a way that makes them slightly more likely to arrive from certain directions aligned with the grid axis, rather than others.
So we'd see a preferred direction, a pattern that shouldn't be there.
Precisely. Finding such an anisotropy, a directional preference, could be a potential signature of a simulated reality. There were also other experimental proposals, like one by Campbell and colleagues in 2017.
Wow. So people are actually looking for the seams in reality.
They're proposing ways to look, yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredibly difficult. These effects would likely be tiny, but the fact that physicists are thinking about how to test it empirically takes it beyond pure philosophy.
So how has this whole idea landed with the general public?
Yeah.
And with, big names in science or tech?
It's had a really interesting reception. Take Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist.
Yep.
He famously said he thought the odds were better than 50-50 that we're in a simulation. He even said, "I wish I could summon a strong argument against it, but I can find none," which is a pretty strong statement.
Definitely. Did he stick with that?
Well, later, apparently, his friend, the physicist J. Richard Gott, raised an objection based on us being typical observers. The idea that if simulations are common, we likely wouldn't be the first non-simulated reality, or maybe we'd be late in a chain of simulations. This apparently made Tyson reconsider, remarking something like, "That changes my life."
Huh. Interesting. What about someone like Elon Musk? He seems interested in this stuff.
Oh, very much so. Musk has repeatedly said he thinks the argument for simulation is quite strong and that it's most likely we're in a simulation.
Wow, most likely.
Yeah, he's even put odds on it, like a 1 in billions chance we're in base reality. His reasoning often comes back to video games. He argues, look how far games has come in just a few decades. Extrapolate that out, and eventually, games will be totally indistinguishable from reality. And if that's possible, odds are someone, somewhere, has already done it, and we're in one.
It's a compelling line of thought, the speed of technological progress.
It is. It definitely makes you wonder.
Okay, so we've gone from the huge scale of the universe down to physics experiments. Let's bring it even closer to home. What about something like a dream? How does that relate?
The dream argument is really a classic form of simulation hypothesis, isn't it? When you're dreaming, you're experiencing a fabricated reality that feels completely convincing at the time.
Right, you're fooled.
Exactly. Bertrand Russell acknowledged that logically we can't prove we aren't always dreaming, though he argued common sense suggests we probably aren't. And Zhuangzi's butterfly dream is the perfect ancient example of using a dream to question reality.
And Descartes, wasn't he famous for questioning dreams too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In his meditations, he has that famous line, "There are no certain indications by which we may clearly distinguish wakefulness from sleep." How do you know you're not dreaming right now?
It's a question that really sticks with you.
It does. David Chalmers, a philosopher who works a lot on consciousness, actually distinguishes two types. The idea you might be dreaming right now, or the more radical idea that you might always be dreaming, that external reality might not exist at all. Though Wittgenstein had a different take. He thought these kinds of deep skeptical hypotheses were ultimately uncynic nonsensical.
Why nonsensical?
Because, he argued, the very act of forming the hypothesis, of using language and concepts to doubt reality, relies on a shared stable reality and knowledge that the hypothesis itself is trying to undermine. You're sawing off the branch you're sitting on, in a way.
Okay, that's a clever counterargument, a foundational challenge.
It is.
So it's clear this idea has deep roots, it challenges us philosophically, it even touches on physics. But let's talk pop culture, because this concept is just everywhere now, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely everywhere. It's really captured the imagination. You can trace it back in literature quite a ways. Daniel F. Galuzzi's novel Simulacron 3 from 1964.
What was that about?
It featured a virtual city, and the inhabitants were conscious computer programs who had no idea they weren't real. Sound familiar?
Very, like an early Matrix.
Exactly. And it was adapted into films, too, like World on a Wire in '73 and The 13th Floor in '99. And you can't forget Philip K. Dick. His story, We Can Remember It For You Wholesale.
Became Total Recall, right? Playing with implanted memories, fake reality.
Mm-hmm. But the absolute game changer, the one that put simulation theory firmly on the map for millions, was The Matrix in 1999.
Yeah, impossible to overstate its impact. Humanity unknowingly trapped in a simulation by machines.
It became the quintessential reference point. More recently, there was even a play called World of Wires in 2012, partly inspired by Bostrom's actual essay.
And video games must love this theme.
Oh, definitely. You see it in games like Danganronpa 2, which has the Neo World program, a simulation for rehabilitation, or Anonymous Code, which gets really meta with infinite world layers of simulations and even simulated computer bugs like the year 2038 problem.
Aha, that's great.
TV shows play with it too. Rick and Morty had that hilarious episode M. Night Shame Aliens, where they're trapped in increasingly bad, low-res simulation.
Right, revealed by the glitches.
And Doctor Who had an episode, Extremis, where the characters realize they're in a simulation because they find a document listing the same random numbers over and over again, a failure of randomization.
It seems like a really fruitful ground for storytelling.
It really is. There have been documentaries, too, like Kent Forbes' The Simulation Hypothesis, featuring Tyson and others, and you hear personal anecdotes like Rizwan Virk, who wrote a book on it, talking about how powerful VR experiences made him genuinely question the nature of base reality.
And wasn't there a recent big streaming series that used it?
Yes. The Netflix series, 1899 from 2022, it built this whole mystery around the characters being trapped in a simulation with memory wipes involved, which kind of echoes that Preston Green idea about the danger of knowing too much.
It really feels like the more our own technology advances, especially with VR and AI, the less far-fetched this whole idea seems to people.
I think that's exactly right. It resonates more and more.
Wow. Okay, what a journey we've been on from ancient Chinese philosophers dreaming of butterflies all the way to cutting-edge physics looking for cosmic ray patterns and, blockbuster movies about digital realities. The simulation hypothesis truly spans this incredible range of human thought.
It really does.
Yeah.
And look, we still don't have a definitive yes or no answer. Probably won't anytime soon, maybe never.
Right.
But the power of the idea, I think, is that it forces you to interrogate your own assumptions. Now, assumptions about reality, what consciousness is, the very structure of existence, it just makes you look at everything a little differently.
It certainly does. So, the final thought to leave everyone with: if, just if, our reality is some kind of simulation, what does that mean for us? For purpose, for meaning, for how we even pursue knowledge? How might just entertaining that thought, even for a moment, change how you experience the rest of your day?
Imagine a whole continent just completely changing, empires falling apart, new countries being born out of, well, really brutal civil wars.
Yeah, and loyalty. That became a really fluid concept, shifting constantly.
It wasn't just a simple fight for independence. It was this huge, sprawling, really complex mess of conflicts that totally reshaped South and Central America. That's what we're getting into today.
We are indeed. We're talking about the Spanish-American Wars of Independence, a series of armed struggles across the massive Spanish Empire, roughly between 1808 and 1833.
Right, and our mission for you as we dive deep into this is to look beyond those sort of standard stories. We want to unpack the layers, why these wars really started, how they played out with some truly unexpected twists.
Definitely unexpected.
And look at the legacy. What did it all mean, and what does it still mean for the countries we see on the map today? It's often pretty challenging stuff. Think of this as your way to get a handle on a really turbulent, pivotal time.
And we've pulled our insights today from a pretty deep exploration of sources, lots of historical accounts, and the very extensive Wikipedia entry on the Spanish-American Wars of Independence. So, shall we set the stage?
Let's do it. Because before a single shot was fired, things between Spain and its American territories were already tense. It wasn't sudden, was it? More like a slow burn.
Not at all sudden. A really big piece of this starts back in the mid-18th century with the Bourbon reforms. The Spanish crown basically decided it needed to centralize power and, frankly, get more money out of its empire.
Okay.
And one thing that's really telling is how they talked about the territories. They stopped calling them kingdoms, which sort of implied they had some standing, you know.
Right, like partners almost.
Kind of. And they started just calling them colonies. Subordinate, that wasn't just words. It was a whole shift in attitude from Madrid.
And that shift, that must have hit the Creoles hard. The people of European descent born over there.
Oh, absolutely. It was a direct hit to their ambitions. The crown started appointing more and more peninsulars, people actually born in Spain, to all the important jobs.
Ah.
So the Creoles, who'd often held influence and expected, opportunities in their own homeland, suddenly found themselves shut out. It really upset the existing local power structures.
And it wasn't just political power, right? The crown also went after the church.
Yeah, the Roman Catholic Church was enormous, huge influence ideologically, economically. The crown tried to assert more state control, regalist policies, they called them.
Like kicking out the Jesuits.
Exactly. 1767 sent loads of Creole Jesuits into exile for life. And they wanted the church's money, too. That led to the 1804 Act of Consolidation.
That sounds ominous.
It was. It basically called in debts owed to the church, often mortgages on big estates. It threatened to bankrupt not just the church, but a lot of wealthy Creole families tied to it. A really significant move.
Wow. So these reforms weren't exactly welcomed with open arms everywhere?
Definitely not. The results were really mixed. Some places like Cuba, Rio de la Plata, New Spain actually saw some economic benefits, which is interesting. But elsewhere, tensions just exploded. You had the revolt of the Comuneros in New Granada, the huge rebellion of Tupac Amaru II in Peru, big violent reactions.
And the Creoles leading these?
Well, often they initially spurred the resistance, yeah. But it's interesting, they often got nervous when the lower classes got too involved, too radical. They preferred stability, even if it meant compromising, rather than risk a total social upheaval.
Stability on their terms. And wasn't there something about the military, too? Spain couldn't really send troops.
Right. Spain was so caught up in wars in Europe, it couldn't properly reinforce the colonies. So they had to rely more on locals for defense, building up local militias.
Which kind of backfired on them.
Totally backfired. By building up local defenses, Spain accidentally gave the locals military experience and organization, undermining its own authority. It sort of laid the groundwork for independence armies later on.
And all this is happening while new ideas are floating around. Enlightenment stuff.
Exactly. Those Enlightenment ideals, social reform, economic reform, free trade, new political ideas like constitutions, popular sovereignty, they were definitely filtering into Spanish America.
Providing a sort of justification, maybe?
Yeah, an intellectual framework for change. It gave people the language and the concepts to argue for something different.
Okay, so you've got all these internal pressures building up, but the actual spark, the thing that really kicked things off, came from Europe, didn't it? Napoleon.
Absolute pivotal moment, 1808. Napoleon, as part of his whole strategy against Britain, basically forced the Spanish king, Ferdinand II, and his father off the throne. Abdication.
And put his brother in charge.
Put his brother, Joseph Bonaparte, on the Spanish throne. This created this massive power vacuum, and pretty much the entire Spanish Empire just refused to accept Joseph as king. Widespread rejection.
So, no king, what happens then? In Spain first, and then in America?
Well, in Spain itself, provinces started forming local juntas, governing councils. It was based on old Spanish legal ideas about what to do when the king is gone.
Okay.
And that idea spread like wildfire to the Americas. You saw some short-lived juntas pop up in 1809, Chuquisaca, La Paz, Quito. Then in early 1810, the main Spanish resistance government, the Central Junta, collapsed under French pressure. That triggered a whole new wave of juntas across Spanish America, and these ones tended to stick around longer.
But here's a really interesting bit, right? At first, these juntas weren't actually aiming for independence.
That's key. Initially, there was, very little interest in a complete break. Most Spanish Americans still claimed loyalty to the deposed King Ferdinand VII.
So the juntas were about?
They saw themselves as preserving local autonomy from the French, not breaking from Spain itself. They were governing in the name of Ferdinand VII. It's sometimes called the Mask of Ferdinand VII.
A clever political move.
Yeah, a facade of loyalty. It bought them time and legitimacy while they figured things out and pushed for more self-rule.
Meanwhile, back in Spain, things were still chaotic. What was happening institutionally there?
The central junta dissolved, and a smaller council of regency took over. And this regency did something pretty radical. They called for a Cortes, a kind of parliament, in Cadiz in 1810.
And this was different.
Hugely different. It was the first national assembly claiming sovereignty in Spain, and crucially, it was meant to represent the entire Spanish world, including the Americas. They invited delegates from overseas.
So how did the American juntas react to this Cortes of Cadiz? Did everyone join in?
Not at all. It was really fragmented. Some regions, like New Granada, Venezuela, Chile, Rio de la Plata, they formed their own self-governing juntas and started moving more clearly towards independence.
Okay.
But others, big areas like New Spain, which is Mexico and Central America, Peru, most of the Caribbean islands, they stayed loyal, or at least under royalist control. And they actually participated in the Cortes. They sent delegates, helped write the liberal Spanish Constitution of 1812.
So it really highlights how decentralized everything was, not one single movement.
Exactly. Which leads us into the next phase where these conflicts really become, well, civil wars.
Right. The sources called them localized civil wars that then grew into secessionist wars. So it wasn't just America versus Spain.
Not even close initially. It was incredibly messy. Fought with irregular tactics, guerrilla warfare, alongside more conventional battles. You had royalists wanting to stick with Spain versus patriots wanting varying degrees of autonomy or full independence, either as republics or maybe even local monarchies.
And who was actually fighting? Was it Creoles versus Peninsulars?
That's the surprising part. Both sides recruited from everyone. Indigenous groups, mestizos, mulattoes, even African slaves were recruited by both royalists and patriots, often with promises of better conditions or freedom.
Wow.
And even the Creole elites, they split too. Their loyalty often depended more on their local economic interests or regional rivalries than on some grand ideology. Even the church was split, with some priests joining the rebels. It was often literally neighbor against neighbor.
That complexity explains why some places took so long to actually declare independence, even after setting up their own governments.
It really does. That mask of Ferdinand VII wasn't just talk, it reflected real hesitation and division. Rio de la Plata, Argentina basically, didn't declare independence until 1816. Chile waited until 1818. Their first goal wasn't necessarily a clean break, but more self-government, maybe within a reformed Spanish system.
Let's look at some specific examples. Mexico always comes up first with Miguel Hidalgo. His revolt sounds like it tapped into some really deep social divisions.
Oh, absolutely. Hidalgo's uprising started as a peasant revolt. It might have been sparked by some liberal city dwellers, but it quickly became this massive rural movement, fueled by anger over bad harvests, poverty, land issues, deep, deep discontent.
It got brutal.
Extremely. The massacre at the Alhóndiga de Granaditas, where Hidalgo's forces killed hundreds of Creoles and Peninsulars pretty much indiscriminately, showed just how intense the social and racial hatreds were. It was a class war almost, wrapped inside an independent struggle.
And down in Venezuela, things were just as brutal with Bolivar's famous war to the death.
Yes, Bolivar declared a war to the death specifically against peninsular Spaniards trying to force a clear divide, make people choose sides.
But then you get this counterfigure, José Tomás Boves, a royalist.
Right. Boves, who was actually a Spanish immigrant himself, did something remarkable. He raised a powerful royalist army, mostly from the Llaneros, the mixed-race plainsmen of Venezuela. Yeah. By attacking the white Creole landowners, who were largely patriots at that point.
So he turned social grievances against the patriots.
Exactly. But then, later on, when the political winds shifted and many Creole elites became royalists to protect their interests, many of those same Llaneros switched sides and joined the patriots under leaders like Paez.
Wow. It just shows how fluid allegiances were, driven by immediate circumstances, not just grand ideals.
Precisely. Causes could be picked up and dropped pretty quickly, depending on who offered what.
So with the central Spanish authority crumbling and all these internal fights, it sounds like chaos. The term Balkanization gets used.
Yeah, it's a useful comparison. Like the Balkans, later, the Spanish Empire fractured. There weren't clear pre-existing national identities waiting to emerge. Provinces often fought each other just as much as they fought Spain.
Any examples?
The big rivalry between Peru, which remained a royalist stronghold for a long time, and Rio de la Plata over control of Upper Peru, modern Bolivia. They were both supposedly fighting for or against Spain, but also fighting each other for regional dominance. Total fragmentation.
Okay, so things are incredibly fragmented. Then, 1814, Ferdinand VII comes back to the Spanish throne. You'd think maybe that calms things down.
You might think so, but nope. It actually did the opposite for many in the Americas. It became a point of no return.
How so?
Ferdinand came back, and immediately he threw out the liberal constitution of 1812 that the Cortes had created. He arrested liberal leaders, brought back the old absolute monarchy, the ancien regime.
So for the American juntas that had been operating under the mask of Ferdinand VII, maybe hoping for a liberal monarchy.
Exactly. This was a clear signal. Reconciliation under a liberal Spanish crown. Not happening. Ferdinand was doubling down on the old ways. For many autonomous governments, this was the final straw. Independence seemed like the only option left.
And Ferdinand, now back in control, decided to send the army.
He did. Spain shifted its main military effort to South America. In 1815, they sent the biggest expeditionary force they'd ever assembled to the Americas, about 10,500 troops. They did manage to reconquer New Granada for a time.
But who was actually in these royalist armies fighting in America? Was it all Spanish troops?
This is a crucial point and often misunderstood. No, not at all. Those European troops suffered heavily from tropical diseases, for one thing. But more importantly, the vast majority of soldiers fighting for the Royalists were Spanish Americans themselves.
Really? What percentage?
Estimates suggest Europeans were maybe only about a tenth, maybe 10% of the total Royalist forces in America overall.
So it really was Americans fighting Americans.
Yeah. Fundamentally, yes. It underlines just how much of a civil war this was, cutting across families, regions, social classes. Loyalty was incredibly complex.
Okay, while Spain is trying to reassert control, the independent side is making some really bold moves. José de San Martin in the south.
San Martin is a fascinating figure, an Argentine Creole, but a veteran officer of the Spanish army who fought Napoleon in Spain. He came back, became governor of Cuyo province in Argentina, and started meticulously planning.
The Army of the Andes.
The legendary Army of the Andes. In 1817, he and Bernardo Higgins, the Chilean leader, led this army on an absolutely incredible crossing of the Andes Mountains, a huge military feat.
To liberate Chile.
Exactly. They defeated the Royalists, secured Chile with crucial help from the Navy, led by a former British officer, Thomas Cochrane, and Chile declared independence in 1818. Masterful strategy.
And Simon Bolivar is doing something similar up north.
Bolivar, equally audacious. In 1819, he led his own grueling march across the Andes into New Granada. Terrible conditions, lost a lot of men.
But it worked.
It worked. He surprised the Royalists, won a key victory at Boyaca, seized Bogotá, the capital, got its treasury. This really cemented his leadership and allowed him to push forward with his vision of Gran Colombia, uniting Venezuela and New Granada.
So you have San Martin coming from the south, Bolivar from the north, like a giant pincer movement.
Pretty much, yeah, across the entire continent.
Okay, we're heading into the final phase. And again, events back in Spain dramatically changed the game in 1820. What happened this time?
Another military revolt in Spain, this time led by Rafael Riego. He was actually supposed to lead troops to America to reinforce the Royalists.
Oh, the irony.
Huge irony. His revolt forced Ferdinand VII to restore the liberal 1812 constitution again.
And the impacts on the wars in America.
Massive. Two key things. First, that expeditionary force Riego was supposed to lead, it never left Spain, so no more reinforcements for the Royalists in America. That was huge.
Game changer.
Big time. Second, the news of the liberal restoration in Spain caused chaos among the Royalist commanders and troops in America. Many started defecting. The new liberal government in Spain thought, maybe naively, that the American insurgents just wanted Spanish liberalism, so they tried to negotiate.
But it was too late for that.
By this point, yeah. For most patriot leaders, independence was the only goal. The Spanish offer wasn't enough anymore.
So Spain's internal problems basically crippled the Royalist cause overseas. And this is when Mexico and Central America make their move, but in a kind of unique way, using that same 1812 constitution.
It's a bit paradoxical, isn't it? They sort of use the framework of the liberal constitution, which technically gave them more standing as kingdoms, but the reality was power still resided in Spain. Frustration grew.
And Agustín de Iturbide comes onto the scene. He was a Royalist officer.
He was a colonel in the Royal Army, but he saw which way the wind was blowing. In 1821, he did something quite pragmatic. He allied himself with Vicente Guerrero, who was one of the main remaining insurgent leaders.
A Royalist and an insurgent teaming up.
Exactly. They came up with the Plan of Iguala. It proposed 3 guarantees: independence for Mexico, but as a monarchy, keeping the Catholic Church central, and equality for peninsulars and Creoles, all new Spaniards.
A compromise plan.
A compromise designed to unite different factions. Spain rejected the treaty based on it, the Treaty of Cordoba, but Iturbide went ahead anyway and was crowned Emperor Augustin I of Mexico in 1822, though Spain didn't recognize it for years until 1836.
In Central America.
They initially gained independence along with Mexico in 1821, even joined Iturbide's empire briefly, but then they peacefully split off in 1823 to form their own federation, the Federal Republic of Central America, which, sadly, didn't last long either. It broke apart later.
Okay, back down south.
Yeah.
San Martin and Bolivar are closing in.
Right. San Martin had moved on Chile and launched a sea invasion of Peru in 1820. He entered Lima in 1821, declared protector of Peru, trying to rally support there.
And Bolivar.
Bolivar was consolidating Gran Colombia. He won the crucial Battle of Carabobo in June 1821, which basically secured Venezuela's independence. Then his best general, Antonio José de Sucre, won the Battle of Pichincha in May 1822 near Quito. That secured Ecuador for Gran Colombia.
And then comes the famous meeting between the two giants, San Martin and Bolivar. Guayaquil, July 1822. What happened there?
It's one of history's great mysteries, really. We don't know exactly what was said behind closed doors. But the outcome was clear. San Martin stepped aside, he retired from public life, left Peru, and Bolivar was left in sole command of the final push against the remaining royalists in South America.
A huge moment. And that final push leads to the Battle of Ayacucho.
The decisive battle. December 9th, 1824, in the Peruvian highlands. Interestingly, the royalist forces were weakened by internal fighting just before the battle.
Really?
Yeah, a split between factions. So Bolivar and Sucre's army, mostly battle-hardened veterans from Gran Colombia, won a crushing victory. Ayacucho basically ended major royalist resistance in South America.
And sealed independence. What about Upper Peru, Bolivia?
With the main war over, Sucre marched into Upper Peru and, in August 1825, declared its independence as a new nation, named Bolivia, in honor of Bolivar. That really marks the end of the major continental wars.
And the world starts recognizing these new countries.
Yes, the geopolitical map was changing fast. The United States recognized several of the new republics as early as 1822. Britain, very eager for trade opportunities, followed suit in 1825, especially after the definitive victory at Ayacucho. The old Spanish monopoly was broken.
So the big wars are over by 1825, but it wasn't quite the end of the story. Some Spanish resistance lingered.
Right. A few coastal fortresses held out for another year or two until 1826, and royalist guerrillas kept fighting in isolated areas for years after that. Spain even tried a couple of small, doomed attempts to reconquer, like an expedition to Mexico in 1829.
But they failed.
Utterly failed. Spain didn't officially give up the idea of military reconquest until after Ferdinand VII died in 1833. They finally renounced sovereignty over continental America in 1836 and slowly recognized the new nations over the following decades. Only Cuba and Puerto Rico stayed Spanish until 1898.
Let's talk about the aftermath. The economic impact sounds pretty devastating. Independence didn't automatically mean prosperity.
Far from it. All those years of war, maybe 15 years in some places, just wrecked the economies. Mines were damaged, agriculture disrupted, infrastructure destroyed.
And trade.
The old integrated trade network within the Spanish Empire collapsed. Trade between the new Spanish-American countries actually decreased compared to colonial times. And without Spanish protection, they were flooded with cheap foreign imports, especially British textiles.
Which hurt local producers.
Hugely, especially indigenous communities who relied on traditional crafts. And to rebuild, the new nations often had to take out massive foreign loans, mostly from Britain, which just led to cycles of debt. They ended up exporting raw materials and importing finished goods. Kind of a neo-colonial economic pattern emerged.
What about socially? Did independence really change the power structures?
It's mixed. On paper, yes, ideas of citizenship and equality were introduced. But in reality, the Creole elites who had often led the final push for independence largely managed to stay on top. They controlled the land, the resources, the new government.
So the old hierarchies persisted.
In many ways, yes. And this led to constant political fights between liberals who wanted faster social change, ending ethnic distinctions, breaking up communal land holdings, and conservatives who wanted to preserve more of the old order, including the church's influence.
And liberal policies sometimes hurt indigenous groups.
Ironically, yes. Some liberal reforms aimed at creating individual private property actually undermined traditional communal land ownership that had offered some protection to native communities under Spanish law.
But one major positive social change was the end of slavery. How did that happen?
It was gradual, but it did happen everywhere eventually. In places where slavery wasn't economically central, Mexico, Central America, Chile, it was abolished relatively quickly after independence.
Where it was important.
In places like Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Argentina, where plantation or domestic slavery was significant, it was a slower process. Often phased abolition, freedom for children born after a certain date, freedom tied to military service. It took about 3 decades, generally completed by the 1850s.
We should also talk about women. Their role seems much more significant than often portrayed.
Absolutely critical. And way beyond just being passive supporters, women organized politically, raised funds, nursed the wounded. Many were crucial spies and informants.
And some even fought.
Yes. Manuela Sáenz, Bolivar's partner, wasn't just his confidant. She was an active participant, a spy, even made a colonel by Bolívar himself. She's seen as a key figure in early feminism in South America.
Any others?
Juana Azurduy de Padilla, a mixed-race woman who led guerrilla forces in Upper Peru, posthumously made a general. Javiera Carrera in Chile, sewing the first flag, a political force in her own right. Marquita Sanchez in Argentina, whose letters provide amazing documentation. They challenge gender roles, even if society tried to push them back into supportive roles afterwards. For many, the fight was also about their own rights.
Okay, so socially complex. What about politically? Stability doesn't seem to have been the immediate result.
Not at all. The post-independence era was incredibly unstable in most places. One big reason was the lack of clear national identity. People identified more with their region or city than with the new, often large and artificial nations.
Which is why bigger states collapsed.
Exactly. Gran Colombia broke apart. The Federal Republic of Central America disintegrated. There were endless debates and civil wars between federalists who wanted regional autonomy and centralists who wanted strong national governments.
And the military played a role in this instability.
A huge role. These wars created large, powerful armies. The officers, the generals, felt they deserved rewards, power, influence. The armies often didn't disband. They became major political players, frequently staging coups, intervening in politics.
Which leads to the rise of the caudillos.
Precisely. The caudillo, the strongman leader, often a military figure, charismatic, commanding personal loyalty. They amassed power through force, patronage, controlling local regions. They dominated Latin American politics for decades, contributing to that cycle of instability.
Lastly, let's touch on the foreign powers again. Their support, or lack thereof, seems important. The UK.
Britain played a really significant role. Officially neutral, but they provided crucial covert aid money, weapons. Thousands of British and Irish veterans, the British legions, fought for Bolivar and were vital in key battles.
Like Boyacá and Carabobo.
Yes, and British naval officers like Cochrane were indispensable for San Martin in the Pacific. Plus, British diplomacy worked hard to prevent other European powers from helping Spain, their main driver, access to those huge new markets.
What about France?
France, interestingly, despite Napoleon starting it all, didn't really get involved in supporting independence in the Americas. They were more focused on restoring monarchy in Spain after Napoleon.
And the United States. Their role was complicated.
Very. Officially neutral, but often leaned towards the insurgents. There was popular support for independence. But U.S. policy was also driven by its own expansionist goals, grabbing Florida from Spain, eyeing Texas. So a mix of sympathy and self-interest.
Russia's involvement sounds like a footnote, but a funny one.
A slightly absurd one, yeah. They sold Spain a fleet of warships that were apparently completely unseaworthy, a total waste of money for Spain, and the whole fiasco contributed to the unrest in the Spanish military that led to Riego's revolt in 1820.
So they accidentally helped independence.
In a roundabout way, yes. And Portugal. Portugal intervened militarily in the Banda Oriental, what's now Uruguay, eventually annexing it as a Brazilian province for a while. They were actually the first country to recognize the independence of the new Hispanic republics in 1821, probably hoping to solidify their own gains.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, it's clear this was so much more than a simple fight for freedom. Just this incredibly complex web of civil wars, shifting loyalties, regional fights, all happening under the shadow of global power politics.
Absolutely. The Spanish-American Wars of Independence did dissolve a centuries-old empire and create the independent nations we see today. But the way it happened left a really difficult legacy. Economic dependency, deep social divisions that often just rearranged the old hierarchies.
Even though slavery did end eventually.
Yes, that's crucial. But also persistent political instability, that legacy of militarism, the caudillos, it shaped these nations for a very long time.
So these wars, they weren't just about getting rid of Spain. They were this huge, painful, chaotic process of trying to figure out what it even meant to be a nation. who held power, what the rules were in a world that was changing incredibly fast.
A profound redefinition.
Which leaves us with a thought. Looking back at such a turbulent birth for these nations, what does it tell us about the messy compromises, the inherent contradictions that often come with forging a new political order, especially when the echoes of those compromises and contradictions can still be felt today?
Imagine a world teeming with life, so small it's invisible, yet so powerful it shaped the entire planet. And it continues to drive countless processes, even, right inside you. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the, well, fascinating world of bacteria. You might think you know bacteria, maybe mostly associating them with getting sick. But this deep dive using sources like Bacteria Wikipedia is really going to show you a different picture. Our mission basically is to explore this incredibly complex, diverse, and often beneficial domain of life. I mean, they've been foundational to Earth for billions of years, and they're still an indispensable companion to you. We'll unpack their ancient origins, their astonishing forms, hidden behaviors, and just their profound impact on everything, your health, the whole global ecosystem. And just a quick thing to start the name. Bacteria actually comes from ancient Greek. It means staff or cane, apparently, because the first ones they spotted, they were rod-shaped. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk history. Their roots. Bacteria were among the very first life forms on Earth. We're talking about 4 billion years ago. Just think about that for a second. For about 3 billion years, that's like 3/4 of Earth's entire history, bacteria and archaea too, were the dominant forms of life. It's not just a long time, it means they basically set the stage, didn't they? They shaped the chemistry, the biology that allowed everything else, including us, to eventually show up.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just being there. These early bacteria were total game changers. They were instrumental in one of the biggest leaps in evolution.
Yeah.
Eukaryotes. Like our cells, they actually arose from ancient bacteria getting into these endosymbiotic relationships. Basically, one cell engulfs another, but instead of digesting it, they teamed up. That's how we think things like mitochondria, the powerhouses in your cells, and later chloroplasts in plants came to be.
Wow. So, okay, they shaped early life. After billions of years, where are they now? Just how pervasive are they? Give us a sense of the scale.
Oh, they're truly ubiquitous. I mean, everywhere you can possibly imagine, not just the obvious places like air, soil, water,
Yeah.
but also in like acidic hot springs, radioactive waste, even deep inside the Earth's crust. And the numbers are just mind-boggling. They're an estimated 2 times 10 to the power of 30 bacteria on Earth.
10 to the 30. That's a lot of zeros.
It's an enormous number. Their total biomass, like their collective weight, is only exceeded by plants. And think about this, something really relevant to you. The bacteria in the oceans, they produce up to half of the oxygen we breathe.
Half. Wow. So half the air I'm breathing right now is thanks to ocean bacteria?
Pretty much, yeah. It's incredible.
It really is incredible. And you mentioned extreme places. Talk about resilience. These are the extremophiles.
Exactly. They survive temperatures from minus 15 Celsius in Antarctica, way below freezing, up to 121 degrees C in hydrothermal vents. That's boiling. Plus, they can endure extreme radiation one type. Deinococcus radiodurans can take 5 million rads, high salt, even the vacuum of space.
It's just amazing how something so small can be so tough. And speaking of small, let's zoom in. How big are they typically?
Typically, yeah, they are tiny. Bacterial cells are usually about 0.5 to 5.0 micrometers long. That's roughly maybe 1/10 the size of one of your own cells.
Oh, okay, microscopic mostly.
Mostly. But here's something that might surprise you. Some species, you can actually see them with the naked eye.
Really? Without a microscope?
Yeah. Think about Margarita magnifica. It can reach up to 2 centimeters in length.
2 centimeters? That's huge. Like 50 times bigger than other known bacteria.
Exactly. Imagine seeing a single tiny white thread, and that's one bacterium.
Yeah.
It kind of changes your whole picture of them, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Wild. And it's not just size, right? Their shapes vary a lot, too.
Oh, definitely. They come in all sorts of shapes. Spherical ones called kochi, rod-shaped ones called bacilli.
Like the first ones discovered.
Right. Then you have curved ones, vibrio, spiral ones, spirilla, and tightly coiled ones called spiritetes. And this variety isn't just random. It's determined by their cell wall and cytoskeleton. And it actually affects how they get food, stick to surfaces, move around, even how they escape predators. Shape matters.
And they don't always live alone, do they? You mentioned multicellular structures.
That's right. While lots exist as single cells, many bacteria form complex multicellular groups. Myxobacteria, for instance, can clump together to form these things called fruiting bodies. You can get up to 100,000 cells in one, with different cells doing specialized jobs. It's almost like a tiny, primitive organism.
Like a microscopic colony. And that ties into biofilms, doesn't it?
Exactly. That's a really important concept. Bacteria often stick to surfaces and form these dense mats called biofilms. And they're not just messy piles, they're quite organized. They have channels for nutrients to flow through, almost like little cities. In nature, actually, most bacteria live in biofilms, not floating free.
Okay, so they build communities. What's the relevance for us, for you listening?
Well, it's hugely relevant, especially in medicine. Bacteria inside a biofilm are way harder to kill, sometimes up to 500 times more resistant to antibiotics than individual free-floating bacteria.
500 times.
Yeah, so this makes them a really big problem in chronic infections or like issues with medical implants, catheters, things like that. It explains why some infections just don't seem to clear up easily.
Right, that makes sense. So, okay, they build these tough communities, survive extremes. What's going on inside the cell? How are they built differently from, say, our cells?
Well, a key difference is that unlike your cells, bacteria typically don't have those large membrane-bound compartments, like a nucleus to hold their DNA or mitochondria. Their genetic material, usually a single circular chromosome, just floats in an area called a nucleoid. And their cell wall is really unique. It's made of something called peptidoglycan. That specific material is actually the target for many antibiotics, like penicillin. That's how those drugs work. They mess up the cell wall construction.
Ah, okay. And that cell wall difference, that's related to the Gram stain test, isn't it?
Precisely. It's a classic test. It separates bacteria into gram-positive. They have a thick peptidoglycan wall that holds the stain, and gram-negative, which have a thinner wall but also an extra outer membrane.
And that difference affects which antibiotics work.
Exactly right. That outer membrane in gram-negatives can act as an extra barrier. Plus, many bacteria have cool external structures too. Flagella, which are like tiny propellers for swimming.
Little motors.
Yeah. Fimbriae, which are like little hairs for sticking to things. And pillili, which are really interesting. They can be used to transfer genes directly to another bacterium.
Gene swapping. We'll come back to that.
Definitely. And sometimes they have a slimy outer layer, a glycocalyx or capsule, that can help protect them from your immune system and also helps them form those biofilms we talked about.
Okay, so lots of tools for survival. But some take it to a whole other level, right? The ultimate survival mode.
Oh, yes. Some gram-positive bacteria, like the ones that cause anthrax, bacillus, or tetanus, and botulism, Clostridium, can form these incredibly resistant dormant structures. They're called endospores. These things are truly remarkable. They basically shut down, show no metabolism, and can survive almost anything intense. UV light, gamma radiation, boiling heat, freezing, disinfectants, even the vacuum of space.
That sounds almost sci-fi, and they last a long time.
An astonishingly long time. Our sources mention spores found in amber that's like 25 to 40 million years old.
Million.
And even spores revived from 250 million-year-old salt crystals. They can stay viable just waiting for geological timescales.
250 million years. It's hard to even comprehend that. So what does that extreme resilience mean for us, practically speaking, especially with those diseases you mentioned?
Well, it means those bacteria are incredibly hard to get rid of. You can clean the surface, but if spores are there, they might survive and then reactivate later when conditions are right. That's why anthrax, tetanus, botulism are such persistent threats. The spores just wait.
Makes sense. Okay, moving beyond just survival. Let's talk about what they do. Their engines, metabolism, growth. How diverse are they and how they get energy?
Astonishingly diverse.
Yeah.
Far more diverse than animals or plants. Bacteria can get energy from sunlight, like plants do, or from a huge range of chemical compounds, organic and inorganic, even things like methane gas or hydrogen sulfide. This metabolic flexibility makes them absolutely crucial for cycling nutrients on Earth. Things like nitrogen fixation, turning nitrogen gas from the air into fertilizer for plants. Only certain bacteria can do that. And decomposition, breaking down dead stuff, mostly bacteria and fungi, ecosystems would just collapse without them.
And they impact our world in other ways too, right? Both good and bad.
Absolutely. For instance, certain sulfate-reducing bacteria are actually responsible for producing toxic forms of mercury for places like swamps or sediments. That gets into the food chain.
Not good.
Not good. But on the flip side, fermentation by bacteria gives us loads of foods. We enjoy cheese, yogurt, pickles, sauerkraut, soy sauce. Even the ethanol in beer and wine often starts with yeast, but bacteria play roles too.
Right. And how do they reproduce? Mostly just splitting in two?
Yeah, the most common way is binary fission. Basically, the cell grows, duplicates its DNA, and splits into two identical daughter cells. It's asexual reproduction. And under good conditions, some can do this incredibly fast, like doubling their population every 17 minutes.
Every 17 minutes, that's exponential growth on hyperdrive.
It really is. That's why a bacterial infection can take hold so quickly.
But wait, if they're just making identical clones, how do they evolve and adapt so effectively, especially to things like antibiotics?
Ah, that's the crucial bit. They aren't just making clones. They have high mutation rates, for one. But the real key is horizontal gene transfer.
Okay, you mentioned that earlier with the pili. How does that work?
Right. So there are a few ways. Transformation is when they just pick up loose DNA from their environment. Transduction is when a virus accidentally carries bacterial DNA from one cell to another. And conjugation, often using those pili, is when one bacterium directly transfers genetic material to another. It's like bacterial, well, not sex, but gene sharing.
And this isn't just within the same species?
No, that's the amazing part. They can share genes between different species, even quite distantly related ones sometimes. This rapid exchange of genes is a massive factor in evolution, and it's exactly why antibiotic resistance can spread so terrifyingly fast through bacterial populations. A resistance gene can pop up in one place and get shared around.
That explains a lot about the challenges we face there. Okay, so they're metabolically diverse, reproduce fast, swap genes. Do they, behave? Do they move with purpose?
Bacteria, absolutely. Many bacteria are modal. They can move, often using those flagella, the little propellers, or some use other methods like twitching or gliding across surfaces. And their movement isn't random. They show behaviors called taxes, moving towards or away from stimuli, like chemotaxis, moving towards chemicals, maybe food, or phototaxis, towards light. Some even respond to magnetic fields, magnetotaxis. They navigate their world.
So they're not just passively drifting. Do they coordinate? You mentioned biofilms. Is there communication involved there?
Yes, very much so. Especially in biofilms, bacteria act like multicellular communities. They communicate using chemical signals. It's a process called quorum sensing.
Quorum sensing, like sensing when enough of them are present.
Exactly. When the population density reaches a certain level, a quorum, the concentration of signaling molecules gets high enough to trigger coordinated group behaviors. This could be releasing digestive enzymes all at once to break down something large, or ramping up toxin production, or even switching on bioluminescence, making the whole colony glow. It makes the group far more effective than just individual cells acting alone.
Wow. So they have social networks, basically. It's clear they're incredibly sophisticated. Now, let's bring it back to us. How do all these abilities translate into their interactions with us and the broader environment?
Right, their roles are indispensable, really. Let's start with the ones living with us commensals. Millions, billions of bacteria live on your skin, in your mouth, your airways, and especially massively in your gut. This is your normal flora or microbiome. Usually they're harmless, just living there. Sometimes they can even be beneficial. But they can cause trouble if they get into the wrong place, right? Like E. coli from your gut causing a urinary tract infection, or bacteria from your mouth getting into the bloodstream and potentially causing heart issues.
Okay, so location matters. And then there are the definite good guys, the mutualists.
Exactly. The relationship is beneficial for both sides. Your gut flora, maybe over 1,000 different species, is a prime example. They are absolutely essential. They help train your immune system. They synthesize vitamins your body can't make, like folic acid, vitamin K, biotondo. They break down complex carbohydrates you can't digest. And here's a big one, vitamin B12. Pretty much all animals need it, but only bacteria and some archaea can actually make it from scratch.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, most animal life depends on these microbes for B12. Without them, we'd have a major deficiency.
That's a fundamental connection, isn't it? We literally can't live without them. But of course, we have to touch on the pathogens, the disease causers.
Yes, unfortunately. While most bacteria are harmless or helpful, some are definitely pathogenic. They cause diseases you've heard of: cholera, syphilis, anthrax, tuberculosis, tetanus, Lyme disease. The list is long. Some are opportunistic pathogens. They usually only cause disease if your immune system is weakened or if they get into a sterile part of your body. And they can cause disease in different ways. Some invade tissues, others produce powerful toxins, like the botulinum toxin, causing botulism, is one of the most potent poisons known.
And fighting these is a constant battle, especially with that resistance issue we discussed.
It's a huge global health challenge, yes. Developing new antibiotics and using the ones we have wisely is critical.
Okay, beyond us directly, bacteria are also huge in technology and industry, aren't they? You mentioned food.
For thousands of years, we've used bacteria, often without even knowing it, to make fermented foods.
Yeah.
Cheese, yogurt, soy sauce, sauerkraut, kimchi. It's all microbial action.
And cleaning up messes, bioremediation.
Yeah, they're amazing bioremediators. Certain bacteria can naturally break down pollutants like oil spills, industrial waste, pesticides. We can harness them to clean up contaminated environments. It's often much greener than chemical methods.
And in farming.
There's Bacillus thuringiensis, usually called BT. It produces a protein toxic only to certain insects. So it's used as a natural, targeted biopesticide, much safer for the environment and other organisms than broad-spectrum chemical pesticides.
And then there's the whole world of biotech.
Absolutely. Bacteria, especially E. coli, are the workhorses of molecular biology and genetic engineering. They're relatively simple, grow fast, and we understand their genetics well. Scientists use them to study genes, figure out what they do, and even engineer them to produce useful proteins. Think about insulin for diabetics. Most of it today is produced by engineered bacteria or yeast. Same for growth factors, vaccines, enzymes. They're like tiny programmable factories.
It's just incredible the range of impact from these invisible organisms. It makes you wonder, how did we even discover them? For most of human history, we had no idea they existed.
Right. The story starts in 1676. A Dutch draper named Antony van Leeuwenhoek. He wasn't a trained scientist, but he was brilliant at grinding lenses and built these amazing single-lens microscopes, far better than anything else at the time. And he looked at everything pond water, scrapings from his teeth, and he saw these tiny moving things he called animalcules, little animals. He was the first human to see bacteria and other microbes.
And nobody else could replicate it for ages.
For over a century. His microscopes were that good, and maybe he kept his methods a bit secret, so the field didn't really take off immediately.
Then the name bacterium came later.
Yeah, in 1828, Christian Gottfried Ehrenberg introduced the term. But the real breakthrough in understanding what they did came later. Louis Pasteur, around 1859, showed that microorganisms were responsible for fermentation and also spoilage. This was huge support for the germ theory of disease, the idea that microbes cause illness.
And Robert Koch solidified that, right?
Exactly. Koch, a German physician, rigorously proved that specific bacteria cause specific diseases, like anthrax and tuberculosis. He developed methods for growing bacteria in pure culture and established Koch's postulates criteria, still used today to link a microbe to a disease. Pasteur and Koch really founded microbiology as a science.
And then a weapon against them, antibiotics.
The first targeted chemical one came in 1910. Paul Ehrlich developed salvarsan to treat syphilis. Then, of course, Alexander Fleming's accidental discovery of penicillin in 1928, though it took until WWII to mass produce it. That really revolutionized medicine.
And finally, a more recent shift in understanding their place in the tree of life.
Yes, a really fundamental one in 1977. Carl Woese was studying ribosomal RNA sequences, basically, core genetic code. And he found that prokaryotes, the simple cells without a nucleus, weren't one group. They were actually two distinct domains of life, as different from each other as they are from us eukaryotes. He named the second group Archaea. So now we have the three-domain system: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. It reshaped our whole understanding of life's evolution.
Wow, what a journey. Okay, so to wrap up, from being Earth's first inhabitants, literally shaping the planet, to being essential partners inside our own bodies, to tools in industry, and sometimes dangerous foes. Bacteria are so much more than just germs.
They really are. Incredibly diverse, incredibly resilient, and absolutely indispensable to life as we know it.
And you now have, hopefully, a much deeper appreciation for these unseen forces constantly at work. But here's a final thought to leave you with, something that really struck me from the sources.
We've only really studied like maybe 2% of all the bacterial species out there. And most of the research, maybe 90%, it focuses on less than 1% of bacteria, mostly the ones that cause disease.
So think about that. What incredible things might the other 98% be doing? What undiscovered roles, what revolutionary technologies or medicines might be waiting in that vast, unexplored microbial world?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? The biggest discoveries about life on Earth might still be hiding in plain sight, in the microscopic realm, right under our noses, or maybe even inside them.